So this is the Backstage Community Sessions for April. Today we'll do the usual release highlights and then quick update on community plugins. We'll also have Karl talking to us about securing Docker images for Backstage, and then Q&A as time allows, and whatever questions there are. So starting off with the release highlights, we had a bit of a bonus release this time around, some trouble with our patch releases that forced us to do one extra minor release or mainline release this time around. So we're at 126 now. Now in that release, we landed a lot of, basically the rest of all of the pieces, the rest of the improvements we wanted to do for the Auth system. We've landed all of the kind of initial service implementations that we wanted to have, and additions in the previous 124 release from the BEP 03. Now we shipped all of the kind of improvements to the way we manage tokens, the way that we kind of scope and reuse user tokens, keeping communication more locked down across plugins. So overall, these are kind of security improvements, but under the hood, there's a talk by Fremen and me from KubeCon that goes into a little bit more depth on this. I think that talk is linked in the release notes. And you will get automated kind of plugin authentication without needing to configure it anymore, which we think will be nice as well. Apart from that, we also had backend system improvements across the board. Well, Heikki here on the call, you did some great improvements using the new logger service basically everywhere. And we got some help with the event system, rolling that out too, just moving over to the new backend system more and more. We also had some improvements from Aramis in the OpenAPI, so linting against a particularly tricky issue that you'd run into defining your OpenAPI schema quite often, and then also some fuzzing, so being able to catch issues in the runtime implementation by fuzzing using the schema. Another thing to call out, catalog errors will no longer be logged by default. There's more information in the release notes. We now made it an event instead, so that the logs are kind of silent by default. And if you want it to be logged, you need to manually subscribe to this event and log it if you want to retain that logging in the backend. And finally, we have a bunch of new Auth providers being migrated to be modules and easily consumable in the new backend system. Also, community helping out there a bunch. So thank you all. Then an update on community plugins. We have our first plugin migrated over to the community plugins repository and published from there. There will be more to come soon in this space, but basically this is finally being rolled out. In the release, we kind of silently rolled out some additions to the Backstage CLI to help out in the migration, to make it as painless as possible to start using these new plugins. There will be more information about that as soon as we have the broader rollout of this thing. But this is underway, and excited about getting the main repo kind of cleaned up, and also the contribution experience for all of these community plugins really improved by not being part of the main repo as well, and more isolated for the different plugins. And that's it. That's all I wanted to share from my side. So I'm going to hand it over to Karl to talk about the secure base image.
Great. Thank you. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared. Give me just, I guess you have to stop sharing.
Make co-host stop sharing. I'll try to do those two things.
All right. Thank you. Looks like I got control. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So one of the items that came up so I work at American Airlines. I'm over our DevOps and DevEx space from a technical perspective. And one of the things that struck me as we continue to look at the vulnerabilities and the security of our applications is that the Backstage default provided Docker file, and when it's built, just wasn't really what I felt like was the best that we could do. So I went out on the internet, looked at different base images, looked to see what we could create on our own and things like that. And ultimately what I had found was that we had lots of vulnerabilities in the official Backstage image. There were 75 there when I captured these notes on the OS level. These notes seem slightly off, but anyway, this is just the running trivia against the Node 18 Bookworm Slim. That's why the numbers seemed a little off to me. So this is just looking at the from line, not even fully Backstage built in. And I compared it across a couple different images as well. As I scroll down, when I actually captured this, when I produced the official Backstage image using the yarn docker build command, and I'll go over all the different commands I ran and what I actually found this morning as well. I did a fresh build of everything, getting fresh vulnerability counts and pulling up just some different files for an example. But anyways, so 382 once Backstage was fully built, 8 of them being Node, 3 of them being Python. And so what I set out to do was basically duplicate the existing Docker file. I didn't want to lose anything from the existing Docker file, but I wanted to tweak it and see if I could try to get some of the vulnerabilities to drop. Working in a large enterprise, regardless of vulnerabilities popping up and whether or not they are actually something that's exploitable, something that we need to worry about, that's kind of a different thing as far as, that takes lots of time and investigation. But if I can reduce the noise, reduce the overall vulnerabilities, regardless if they're exploitable or not, to me, that's a win. It's less investigations that have to be done by myself and my team. And overall, more investigation has led to what I believe is a safer Docker image. So in this case, what I was looking to do is I chose the ChainGuard Wolfie base. I'm sure there's lots of other great images out there from a base perspective, but ChainGuard kind of stood out on how they build their images, on how they manage their supply chain security as well, and ensuring everything's built from source. So that's the route I went. If there's other alternatives or things like that, I'm sure they could be added to the contrib folder, or we could tweak or adjust as needed. But that's what I went with. Just as a note, you'll see that I updated from APT to APK. Internally at American, we didn't want to switch to a Musil-based variant. We've seen plenty of issues when Musil gets introduced, and from a troubleshooting perspective, reliability perspective, overall, we've kind of written off those variants, and we try to stick with glibc. So Wolfie base is designed for glibc, but you'll see that they use the APK package manager. So as I continue through, I did make a pull request. We can check out what the original Docker file looks like and the Docker file after. There's not, it should be pretty much in the same order. Like I said, I copy and pasted the document and then tweaked it from there. So our primary image in the upstream Docker file is Node 18 Bookworm Slim. And if I just jump over to my terminal here for a moment, we'll see that just that base image, I think when I captured the notes, it was around 74, 75. And this morning it's at 74 vulnerabilities. Just one critical, which isn't too bad. Lots of negligible, but these are still popping up on our enterprise scanners, and just something that at the end of the day, I don't want to have to go through 74 different vulnerabilities, mark false positives, mark different things like that. It's much easier if we can start off with a better image. So I'm not going to go through the whole Docker file here, but I'll jump over to the contributed Docker file that I made. It's at the contrib Docker minimal. It's supposed to be hardened image. I made a pull request to get that adjusted. But anyways, here you can see the from line is CGR dev. With ChainGuard images, the free images that they provide, the only free ones they provide are the latest tag. Full disclosure, I have no relationship with ChainGuard or anything like that, not making money or anything like that. But I really did see what they were doing as something beneficial for our own use. And I felt like this was also beneficial for the community as well. While they only allow the latest tag, that's just the base OS. We can still determine what Python and Node versions we want. Due to the existing Docker file using Node 18, Node 18 is used here. However, in our production Backstage instance called Runway, Runway uses Node 20. Not that it's a big difference. So you can see we're setting the relative version of Node we want, the relative version of Python. I am looking to see how we can use automated tooling like RenovateBot to keep these package versions updated. Still more to come on that. I'm working with ChainGuard on solutions and looking to see what I can find out there as well. I do have something working right now with Renovate. It's just kind of a little nasty and I'd like it to be cleaned up. So you can see we changed from APT to APK. No big deal there. I don't know that there's a whole lot of notable changes to really go over. Because this is a new file, I don't have a diff necessarily to show at the moment. We are choning to the non-root user. So we're still taking into consideration the best practices around that. We do have to use the root user initially to install packages, but after that, we can change the user and lock things down a little better from what I've seen. So jumping over back to Gripe in my terminal, we can see there's 404 vulnerability matches when I built this image this morning. I'll just go over how I built this real quick. Yarn install, yarn TSC, build all, and then I built the Docker image. The initial image I retagged just to make it a little easier to differentiate them locally versus just using example backend latest. And I built both images. I have both locally, and I did a scan on both of them. And when I said I didn't have a diff, I guess I kind of lied a little bit because we can actually see the diff here because I just replaced it for demonstration purposes to get the image building as expected. So there are some changes, but overall tried to keep it very similar. So updates are a little bit easier and there's not as many differences. So 404 vulnerabilities, that's a lot to chase down. That's not something I really want to have to do. Still a lot are negligible, increased the critical a little bit, but still something that I don't want to spend my time doing. So let's look at the ChainGuard produced image. I have statistics in the GitHub issue about what I actually found and what I showed at the beginning of this, but jumping into what I found this morning, a couple more vulnerabilities than what I wanted. I didn't change any packages. We're using Node 18 versus 20. Maybe that makes a little bit of a difference. But I know in our production image, we've got even fewer images, fewer CVEs than 15. And when we look at where the CVEs are coming from, one thing I wanted to point out is the Backstage modules, or the modules that Backstage utilizes and pins to. There's times where there's already a fix out there or something like that. So the ChainGuard images aren't, the base image change isn't meant to address the NPM type, but it should be pretty much addressing as much as it can from an APK perspective. There are a couple of vulnerabilities that have popped up. I'm not really sure off the top of my head how to address this. Maybe a bump to 20 will fix some of them. But anyways, so you can see we went from 404 vulnerabilities reported by Grape down to 15, which is much more manageable. And the APK ones can be addressed, and then through the NPM packages, we might be able to address the rest as well. So that's what I found. And as far as the success story, we were able to reduce the vulnerability count in our Backstage instance quite a bit. And it reduced the amount of time that the teams have to spend to investigate and remediate these sorts of issues, and much cleaner going forward. We've also hooked this up with Dependabot at the moment to keep the image up to date with the latest digest. However, I'm still working on the Renovate package updates as well. So I think that's pretty much all I had to share. We have, after I found the ChainGuard base images and utilized it with our Backstage instance and then contributed to the community, we did look at a internally we looked at a commercial subscription from them. Still undetermined where that's at right now. However, it seemed to be very successful, and because of what we saw through the Backstage, we continued to investigate further. So any questions around this? Any thoughts? Anything I messed up?
Thank you a lot for
Alright.
sharing. Yeah, if any questions pop up, we can cover them in the Q&A later as well. Awesome work, and thank you for contributing it back. And I'd say we really, I mean, the ideal end state is that we adopt this as a base image. So we're very interested in hearing from any adopters. Like if you pick this up and use it, and I encourage you to do that for the benefits in. What's the experience? Like good, bad, especially as you start like troubleshooting scenarios and so on. Docker images can be a point of friction, but I'm glad to see that Musel isn't involved in the mix, because that in particular has been troublesome in the past.
Definitely, yeah. The Backstage conversion seemed.
I think
I've
it
done
really could make
lots.
sense to adopt this as the recommended base. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've done this conversion on a couple different application types now. Backstage was probably one of the easier ones to address, which was nice, but definitely good comments on Musel as well. So whatever I can help with, if we feel as a community it's a good move forward, I think reduction in CVEs and stuff is great, but happy for more comments or whatever we can do to improve it. Thanks. And I did drop a link in chat as well to that pull request if anyone's interested.
Thank you. And let's move over to general Q&A. I won't reshare the slides, but any questions about the project in general? What's going on? Floor is open. I can share that at KubeCon we presented in the State of Backstage. In the talk we shared that we were going to start working on the backend system, rolling out the new backend system as 1.0 stable release. That work has now started. Very early, but it's been started and ongoing. As we mentioned during the talk, it's a couple of months is what we're looking at to complete that. If there are no other questions, let's call today. Yep. Thank you everyone for attending. See you.